When I was 22, I started seeing a guy who I met on a dating app for a while. His name was Hunter. We went on like 4 dates in the span of a little over a month. At first, things seemed all right. Our first date was a quick coffee date, less than an hour, more of a screening process to make sure he seemed normal. Our second date was at a nearby bar for some drinks. We both got a nice buzz, and it was a nice time. Our third date was dinner, and this was when I started to question things. Question if I really clicked with his personality or if I felt like there was something slightly off about him. The date ended with a kiss. Still the first and only time we ever kissed. So I convinced myself that because I let him kiss me, things went all right. It wasn't until a couple weeks later that we went on our fourth and final date. We went out for drinks. Once again. However, this time I went into it with a less excited mindset, and I was paying more attention to little quirks in his behavior that I realized were kind of unusual. It's hard to explain exactly what I mean, but some of his mannerisms just gave off antisocial and borderline creepy vibes. He started to drink way too much on this date as well, and he started getting really touchy-feely at the bar, trying to kiss multiple times. I'm not a fan of PDA, especially not when sitting at a bar with people next to me. I politely turned down his advances, and within a few minutes I mentioned I was tired heavily, implying we should leave. He asked for the check, paid it, and then we grabbed our coats and left. As we were walking to our cars, he stopped me and very bluntly asked me if we could go home together. I said not tonight. I'm tired and have work tomorrow, which was a lie. He shockingly kept trying, saying he dragged me to work tomorrow and such. I found it to be absurd, whether he was drunk or not. I also wasn't a fan of him, drunk driving home. I made the decision at that point that I wouldn't see him again. I went to my car in the parking lot across the street and started driving home slowly, just because I had a couple drinks in my system. I wasn't drunk, but I was still very cautious. I was also overly alert of my surroundings, looking around for cops, which perhaps is why I picked up on the fact that the same car was behind me. Still, after I made at least 3 turns and at a certain stoplight, I realized it looked like Hunter's car. I texted him, "Are you following me?" He texted back pretty quickly, saying, "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home, okay?" I called him, but he wouldn't pick up. This was so weird and quite frankly creepy. I pulled over and texted him to stop following me. "I'm fine." He stopped in the middle of the street for a second, I presumed to read my text, and then he drove off. Asked me, he didn't text back. Not until I got home and was in bed. He said as follows: "I hope I didn't weird you out tonight. Sorry, I got so drunk. Next time, we should do something a little more low-key, like dinner at my place or something." I didn't answer, so the next morning he followed up with, "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I still decided to wait a bit to respond. Not even 2 hours later, he sends me a question mark. So I decided to reply now, before it got worse. I said, "Hey, I had a great time getting to know you, but I just think our personalities don't click that much. I also really just want to focus on myself right now. I hope you understand." After this was when the angry texts started coming in, the worst of which being, "No, I don't understand. You strung me along for 4 dates to tell me that, how about you pay me back half of everything I bought for you?" Then there were a few other angry texts that involved personal information, so I'm not going to include them, but they were enough to prompt me to block him. I thought this would be the end of it, but then I started receiving no caller ID phone calls non-stop. I ignored all of them until he finally seemed to get the message and stopped the next day. When my parents weren't home, I got home from work to find a bouquet of flowers on the stoop, along with a card. The card was an apology from Hunter asking for a second chance. He somehow knew where I lived. That disturbed me in his mind. He somehow must have thought that this would come off as charming or sweet, when in reality it was extremely alarming. I sent a long and final text to him to please not contact me anymore and never come to my house again, or I'd file for a restraining order. I kept his number blocked so I wouldn't see his response. I thought things would be over now, but I couldn't be more wrong. It was not long after this that I was home alone for the night. My parents' house is big, and I had a loft bedroom, which meant my bedroom was the highest point in the house. I awoke in the middle of the night to something. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but I felt as though I was hearing noises from downstairs. I tried my best to listen closely, and then I heard what was very obviously a door opening from outside my bedroom. One of the upstairs doors. Nobody was supposed to be home that night. Even in my haze from freshly waking up, I still immediately thought intruder. I crawled out of my bed onto the floor and shimmed under the bed before calling 911. I texted everyone in my family asking who's home. I heard some distant noises from somewhere in the home. One of the other bedrooms, and then my bedroom door opened and footsteps came up the carpeted stairs. After they reached the top step, there was silence. The whole room was carpeted, so I couldn't hear any potential footsteps, and then I heard the drawers next to my bed begin opening. I held my mouth with my hands to mask my breathing. I could feel my heart racing. I heard a man's voice say, "God damn it," under his breath. In that moment, I thought, wait, that might have sounded like Hunter's voice. I still didn't move. And I prayed my phone did not get any notifications. Now I heard more rummaging sounds. He was going through my entire dresser. Then I heard and felt the bed move as he sat down. I was staring at the outline of two shoes through the bed skirt. Even in the dark, it was visible. I don't know what he was doing on the bed, but he sat there for over 2 or 3 minutes before getting up, and I heard him say under his breath, "Thing." I heard all the drawers close, and then I heard footsteps walk back down the stairs, the door shutting, and then sounds of footsteps walking down the stairs to the living room. I called 911 now, and I still whispered into the phone just to be safe. I stayed on the line and stayed under the bed for 10 to 50 minutes until one of the police officers showed up, and I went down to meet them at the front door. An event that was tense. After letting him in and told him everything he didn't already know from the phone call, he responded to as such. He did his sweep of the house, and during that another officer arrived, this one female who also assisted in the search. It turned out every window was unlocked, and one of the windows, the dining room one, is big enough for someone to crawl through, though I don't think anyone ever pictured someone squeezing through the bush in front of the window and then crawling through it. I gave a verbal statement of everything. I was given our port number, and they left when my parents returned home the next day. They already knew everything from my texts and phone call with them. We went to the police station with my report number and gave as much information as possible, such as text screenshots, including him admitting he was following me home. They said they'd investigate, though, without solid proof. It was him inside the house. It was tricky. I think the case lost steam when I really didn't have any proof of anything. I did, however, successfully get a restraining order against him, and I was advised to never accuse him of having broken in, nor ever contact him again. He thankfully didn't. But from that point till the moment I moved out of my parents' house, I was always uncomfortable. He would be creeping around outside, even today. I sometimes fear he might find out where I currently live. I was in the 6th grade when this happened. This all started on the week of Halloween, when I would stay after school to help decorate a haunted house for my school's Halloween carnival. I often got to stay and fool around with some of my friends while getting awarded with pizza for helping decorate along with my friends. There was also this other kid who would stay late. I'll call him Chris. We had gotten along for the entirety of the time that we would stay after school, and he never once gave me any reason to feel uneasy around him. He was genuinely a funny and cool kid. But anyway, fast forward 2 weeks, I was suddenly approached by a group of girls in my grade who were all excited and had wide grins on their faces. I asked them what was going on, only for them to tell me that I had a secret admirer and that he would be texting me tonight. Now, I'd be lying to you if I told you that I wasn't excited, or at the very least curious about this. I wanted to know who later that night, when I was about to go to sleep. I got a notification from Messenger. It was the only app I had at the time that I always used to communicate with my parents. Whenever I was home alone, the message was from Chris. I had completely forgotten that I added him on Facebook on Halloween. I opened the message and it read, "Maya, I need to talk to you." I was concerned and quickly replied, "Yeah, what's going on? Everything okay?" To this day, I wish I hadn't replied. The typing bubbles appeared and stayed there for a good 2 minutes, which meant that he was still typing. It felt like forever until his message finally came through. I didn't expect what came next. In a long paragraph, He confessed his love for me and how I've been driving him crazy since Halloween. He also proceeded to explain how he tried to impress me during recess and fed with his soccer skills, but that I never seemed to notice him. He said that he was growing tired of being ignored, and it ended with, "I want you to notice me." So I guess what I'm trying to say is, will you be my girlfriend? I cringed at every word. I stared at the message for a long time. What the hell? I barely even know this kid. And I drifted apart from him a long time ago. I was trying to come up with a way to let him down easily, as I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I told him I didn't like him like that, and that I wanted to just be friends. I could tell right away that he didn't like this answer. He kept asking me why, and I had to come up with a reason each time, until he eventually stopped answering. The next morning was a nightmare for me. Some of his friends kept coming up to me and telling me that Chris wanted to kiss me, which he told the entire grade he wanted to do, and that he would do it even if it meant cornering me, taking this as a threat. I decided to tell my teacher. She told me to stay inside during recess and lunch, and that if he ever got even close to me, to run right back to the classroom. This wasn't enough for me. I reported him to the principal, who told me he would do something right away, and this gave me some relief. I feel I should mention that I lived right across the street from my school, and everyone knew this, including Chris. Which leads me to what happened next later on in the week. I was walking home from school. I hadn't even been inside my house for more than 2 minutes before I heard someone knocking on my front door. I peeked out the window just in time to see someone ducking behind a parked car across the street. It had to be Chris. He must have been following me. My mom opened the door to find a piece of paper on the floor, and not surprisingly, it was addressed to me. I read the note out loud, and it said there was a surprise waiting for me under the Cadillac in my driveway, which at the time belonged to my brother. My mom went to check, only to find nothing. But it was after this day my brother's Cadillac stopped working. I still have no idea what Chris did to the car, but my brother was forced to sell it. Unfortunately, my nightmare doesn't end there. I was constantly harassed by Chris's friends telling me to give him a chance and that he would treat me right. There was even a moment when I caught Chris taking a picture of me walking home. And the only reason I saw him was because I barely heard the sound of an iPhone camera behind me. Who knows how many photos of me. He had on his phone, and every morning I woke up to a message from him with something along the lines of, "I can't wait to see you at school," or "I bet you'll look beautiful today." The harassment and stalking were only getting worse, and it was making me fear for my safety, especially now that he knew where I lived. Finally, I got a call into the counselor's office, and I felt relieved, expecting her to tell me that Chris was going to get in trouble or that the cops would get involved, anything. Instead, what I heard was worse. The counselor proceeded to tell me that boys will be boys, that they do crazy things when they're in love, and that I shouldn't be mad about this. She told me I should feel flattered, as this kind of stuff was bound to happen, and that the only thing I could do was to accept it and learn from it. At the time, I didn't see the problem with her words, as I genuinely believed her. But looking back on it now, this was an insane and disturbing thing to say to a 6th grader, who was being sexually harassed and who was fearing for her safety almost every day that afternoon. I came home from school telling my mom everything the counselor told me, and she was rightfully furious. I was called to the principal's office again that same week, this time with my mom present. I remember very clearly my mom telling the counselor and principal, "What are you waiting for something bad to happen to her before you do something?" She continued to ask why it was taking so long for something to be done. They both stayed silent. My mom ended it by threatening the counselor and telling her to never speak to me again unless she was present. But unfortunately, I don't think the school ever did punish Chris, which to this day enrages me. He basically got away with everything. It doesn't even end there. One night during the weekend when my parents had gone shopping, I was about to go to bed after watching a YouTube video on my iPad when I heard something at my window. I'm on the second floor, so this was especially strange. The only thing that hits my window are birds accidentally flying into it. I was up listening, Lenning, then it happened again. It sounded as if someone had thrown something at the glass. Then that happened again and again. They were consistent thuds, and it was starting to freak me out. Finally got a courage to get up from my bed and see what it was. My heart dropped into my stomach when I opened the curtain and looked down to see Chris holding a handful of rocks looking up at my window. We somehow had managed to figure out which window was mine. He was about to throw another when he noticed me. I could ever so slightly see that he was saying something, but I didn't stop to see what. I remember going to see if every window and door was locked, and thankfully everything was when I returned to my room. I received 4 messages from Chris. Why did you leave? I just want to talk. I'm sorry. All they wanted was a kiss. Please forgive me. You are not who I thought you were. Bye. I blocked him after that. Thankfully, I never had another incident, even though I had to see him throughout the entirety of my school years, from 6th grade to senior year. The last thing I heard about him was that he was arrested. God only knows. For what the saddest and scariest part of my story, though, is the fact that a counselor was comfortable with telling me that this kind of behavior was a compliment and a learning experience for me as a girl. I just hope that woman no longer works with children and that I never have to see Chris again.